construction by various sorts of companies, development companies, and so forth. And the Cooper Center has millions of fossils and millions of artifacts collected over the last 40 to 50 years. So we have lots of stuff to do. One of the missions of the Cooper Center, which is a partnership between the County of Orange and Cal State Fullerton, is to do research on all this material and make it and the knowledge available to the public, especially the citizens of Orange County. But since we work on things like fossil whales that roam all the seas, at least the North Pacific and South Pacific, and even other parts of the world, we actually serve the citizens of the world. And if we can ever find that very first human that came to Orange County probably 13,000 years ago, we'd make the big time. Oldest human in North America. We're going to try that. I'm not quite sure where we're going. Anyway, the Cooper Center is very proud to present a great lecture tonight. And I want to first introduce our curator of archaeology, Janine Peterson, who will tell you about the future program.
Jerry, I just wanted to let you know that next month we will be hosting two speakers. It will be Desiree Martinez and Craig Torres. They are both from the Gabrielino Tonga tribe. Craig is an educator and Desiree is an archaeologist. And they will be talking about the importance of shell in the Gabrielino culture. And in particular, the Gabrielino were known as the Havakam to many other Native American tribes around the region. And Havakam means the beautifully dressed or beautiful people. So the shell and the adornment, the use of shell and adornment was very important to the Gabrielino tribe. So it should be a very interesting lecture. And that's going to be on August 20th, a Tuesday at the same time, 7 p.m., 7:30. So please join us for that. Thank you. This is Meredith, she's our paleontology curator.
Hello, thank you for coming. So now I'm very pleased to announce our speaker for tonight, Dr. Kayla Causey. Kayla comes to us from Cal State Fullerton. She's a lecturer there in the psychology department, actually. And she is also the director of the Coastal Dolphins Project of Orange County, and she's a board member and scientific advisor for the Gray Whale Foundation. And she has an interesting background in that she's actually has her doctorate in psychology, and she's interested in early childhood development. And so now she's looking at dolphins and comparing them to the studies that have been done on the great apes, and looking at the development of intelligence in these socially complex creatures. I will pass it on to Kayla now and let her tell you all about it. Thank you for coming. I'm excited to be here. Thank you to Meredith and to the Cooper Center for having me here to talk to you about something that I've been thinking about for a long time now. And as Meredith mentioned, it started from an interest in humans and human intelligence, the human mind, and how we came to be this intelligent species that we are, how we came to be intelligent in the ways that we are. And so I started off with this interest, and I thought, well, maybe we should look at other animals in the world, and every animal is smart in their own way, right? They're all adapted to their own environments in their own way. But there are some animals that are smart in ways that we are smart. So what do I mean about this, being smart? Well, humans we're very flexible in our behavior and our cognition, so much so that we've been able to adapt to inhabit every continent, almost every continent of the Earth. And so then when you think about dolphins, and this is actually just the home range for bottlenose dolphins, they've come to inhabit almost every ocean of the Earth, which is pretty impressive. So there's been a lot of work, a lot of comparative psychology work on primates, chimpanzees, and bonobos and humans, and a little less so on dolphins. And so I started looking into this literature and becoming really interested in why dolphins are smart the way they are, why they're smart in the ways that we are. And I have to kind of credit some of this to my dad. When I started taking up an interest in cetaceans, being the very practical person that he is, he said to me, what do we have to learn from dolphins? I mean, you know, sharks, they don't get cancer. Why don't you study sharks? Well, it's a good question. I think that the dolphins have a lot of secrets still to share with us. And so I hope today to kind of talk to you about some of these things, and hopefully by the end of this talk answer that question. What do we have to learn from dolphins? So when I'm talking about these cognitions and behavior, they're smart like we are, what does that mean? We think of dolphin cognition, their thought processes, their decision making as a mental toolbox. We can kind of look at the tools that they might have in this toolbox, and we find that their tools are quite similar to ours. So for instance, they're very good at problem solving. Problem solving is kind of a general term, so let me break it down, tell you a little bit more about the cognitive capacities that are necessary for problem solving. The first sort of precursor to problem solving is creative behavior, or object play. The ability to see an object and use an object as something other than what it is. And we see dolphins do this. We see them play with seagrass, with sargassum grass, with seaweed, with kelp. They pass it along from one another. And so what is play? Like, from a biological standpoint, what is play? How do we define play? Well, from a biological standpoint, we define play as any activity, any expenditure of calories that doesn't have a direct payoff, that doesn't have any biological function, okay? It's just kind of an expenditure of activity without really any gain. So there's this puzzling question. Mother Nature she's not superfluous. She doesn't deal in excess. So why would we have species out there that play and sort of seemingly waste calories for no good reason? There must be some function. So this is one of the things that kind of keeps me up at night. We see dolphins and humans are the only two species that really play into adulthood. Okay? Chimpanzees, bonobos, they play, but they can do this while they're young kids. Okay? They don't do this as adults as much as we do. Even, you know, as professionals, we talk about playing with ideas, and play is something that is part of our species culture. So we have this, you know, kind of bubble play that you may be familiar with. I'm going to have to skip over some of these kind of quickly just for the interest of time. My YouTube videos aren't going to work because the Wi-Fi is a little slow in here. But what I'll do is I can post this presentation on my website, and maybe we can host it at the Cooper Center, so that if you want to go back and look at some of these videos, they can be available to you. So another thing that's in this problem-solving toolbox is the use of insight. There's a great example of a chimpanzee who is given a tube, a clear plexiglass tube, and there's a peanut in the bottom of it. And of course he wants to get the peanut out. So he has this tube, and he's looking at it, and he pokes things in there, and it's too narrow to really put a stick in and fish it out. And soon enough you see him have this insightful, this aha moment, where you see the chimpanzee in the camera, and he goes over off view of the camera and comes back and has water in his mouth that he's taken from his water container, and he spits it into the tube. He goes and does it again, gets water, spits it into the tube. Eventually the peanut rises to the top, and he's able to fish it out. He's using the water as a tool, and he has this insight. It's not by trial and error, it's as though all of a sudden he's had this aha moment that I can do this. Same thing happens with dolphins. My favorite story about insight with dolphins is just kind of an anecdotal story from a trainer at SeaWorld who there was this problem of trash getting into the dolphins' tanks, and then it sinks to the bottom, and you have to pay somebody to be a diver or snorkel and go down and do that to clean it up. Let's see, we're smart humans, solve this problem. Let's train the dolphins to go down and fetch the trash out of their pool, bring it up to us, and for every piece of trash, we'll give them a fish. Okay? Reinforce that behavior. So it's great, you do this, they bring it down, dolphins pick up on this really quickly, come down with a bucket of fish, go through an entire bucket of fish, takes clean, everybody's happy. And then, for the sake of the story, let's say a week later, they come back with a bucket of fish to do this again. Well, this time, they go through the bucket of fish, and their dolphins are still bringing up trash. Wow, open another bucket, go through 2 buckets of fish. Next week, go through 3 buckets of fish. Next week, 4 buckets of fish. You see where this is going. So, what's going on? The tanks can't be getting this much more trash. So they send somebody down to the underwater view They're tearing the trash to make more of it, so that they get more fish. It's pretty bad. So we also see instances of tool use, both in chimpanzees and in dolphins. And so the picture at the top right here is of a dolphin in Australia where they use sponges for foraging. And so this is something where play, creative play, can easily get transformed into this insightful moment of discovery where you say, oh, you know, I could do something more with this than just use it for play. I could actually put this over my rostrum and use it to protect my rostrum from scratches and things like that when I'm foraging through the substrate for food. And that's in fact what they use it for. And they pass down this information to their young. It's a cultural innovation there. Only Australian dolphins forage with sponges. And it's only the calves of mother foragers, with mother sponge foragers that learn to forage with sponges. There's also this recent video floating around YouTube of a dolphin in Hawaii who approached divers to help seeking help, seemingly, they had filament, fishing wire, wrapped around its pectoral fin and a hook stuck in it. And it approached these scuba divers rather, and hung around until the scuba divers would untangle it, and they did, and it swam away. Thank you very much. Took off. So we see these instances of a dolphin recognizing that an object in its environment can be used for something else. Okay, this kind of flexible cognition. Primates do the same thing. They use rocks as hammers and anvils for cracking nuts. We see them use sticks for termite fishing. That was Jake Goodall's discovery. We also see some pretty sophisticated planning ability in dolphins, more so than you see in chimpanzees. They're able to coordinate their behavior. And in this video, what you would see is dolphins are trained that if they take a weight over to like a puzzle box, they can drop the weight on it, and eventually a treat would be released, a fish would be released from the box. And they had to carry about 3 weights over before it was enough weight to release the fish from the box. Well, it wasn't very long before dolphins were able to sort of plan ahead, and instead of swimming one by one weight at a time over to the puzzle box, they just swam around their tank, scooped up all 3, swam over and dropped them. So this kind of planning, this kind of foresight is something that we previously thought was really only unique to humans. You really don't see chimpanzees or bonobos even performing this. And I think some humans are still kind of working on it. So it's pretty sophisticated problem-solving abilities. We also see what we call social learning, or culture, the ability to learn by watching others rather than figuring it out by trial and error on your own. And we see good evidence of this in captivity. One of the most basic forms of social learning, of learning from others, is to point. Okay? Doesn't seem like a really big deal to us, because we do this all the time, but if you're a parent, I know that you know when your kid starts to point at things or starts to follow your pointing, it's like a big deal. All of a sudden you're interacting and you're communicating. And it is a big deal. It means that if I point to something in the world, I understand that you don't know it's there, and I'm intentionally acting to direct your attention to it. So I have some kind of representation of your knowledge state, and I'm seeking to change that. And vice versa. If you point to something in the world, and I follow that pointing, I know that you are pointing with the intention of showing me something that I currently don't know about and that I need to attend to. Okay? So see, we're all pretty bright. So it turns out that both in captivity, both chimpanzees and dolphins will follow the pointing behavior of a human. Dolphins are better at it than humans. Dolphins are better at it than chimpanzees. Chimpanzees will follow pointing if you're really close to the object and almost touching it. Like, look, it's right there. And I'm like, okay. The dolphins will follow pointing and approach target from meters away. So pretty sophisticated cognition there. And this may not be then too surprising when you consider what dolphins do in the wild, and that they will often engage in what we call echolocative eavesdropping, where they will use the echolocation of another dolphin to figure out where food is in the sand. They'll use the body orientation of that dolphin. The rostrum is almost like a pointer. There's some fish in the sand, and they can use that to figure out where food is in their foraging. We don't see a lot of evidence, if any, of chimpanzees using referential pointing in the wild. So dolphins seem to have one-up on chimps there. Now, imitation and mimicry is another great way to engage in some social learning. And we see pretty sophisticated imitation and mimicry both in chimpanzees and in dolphins, both in captivity and in the wild. So much so that it's led one leading primatologist to ask whether dolphins can ape better than apes ape. Now, it's really great if you can play and discover new tools, and if you can learn about those tools from other conspecifics, other members of your species, other individuals by watching them. But it's even more efficient if you can actually communicate about it, right? So that's what we do. So what kind of communication do we see in dolphins? Well, let's start with chimpanzees and bonobos. In captivity, we call these enculturated chimps, meaning they were raised like human children. They have never been in the wild, they are raised like babies. And Washu and Chimsky, which is a play on Noam Chomsky, if you're a linguistics fan, you'll get that, were two chimpanzees that were taught sign language. And they learned sign language pretty efficiently and pretty proficiently. However, they did not learn, so they were able to name things using signs, but they weren't able to combine these signs into a sentence, for instance. They weren't able to use syntax or learn the difference between nouns and verbs. However, Causey was a bonobo who, using a lexigram, which is like a keyboard with individual pictures, was able to kind of create and combine new phrases. He could understand the difference between dog bites man and man bites dog, for instance. Now we see dolphins in captivity are capable of learning this distinction too. They can learn signals for verbs, for actions, like swimming under or over or through something. And then they can also learn the signals for nouns or objects in their tank. So they can learn the difference between the signal to take the rig to the basket versus take the basket to the rig. So this is showing an understanding of word order, an understanding of syntax, which is one of the requirements of true language. Now in the wild, naturally, we see chimpanzees, a couple of studies have been done on this, and they find that there are about 30, another study found 66, so obviously the jury's still out here. There are 30 different manual gesture types in mature chimpanzees, things like an arm beckon, kind of gesturing of a point, and things like this. Capuchins, which is this monkey, have different calls for different predators, but this is not a learned call. These are things that are instinctive. This is information that they're born, calls that they're born making. And then, of course, you've all probably heard about dolphins exchanging signature whistles at sea. And this is pretty exciting. This means that dolphins have some kind of identifying whistle that's particular to them, and that when they meet a new group of dolphins at sea, they will make that whistle. And then the new group of dolphins will make their whistle. And then they match them. They mimic them back to each other. So it's as though, Meredith and I were to see each other from across the building. Hey, Meredith, it's Kayla. Oh, hey, Kayla, it's Meredith. It's that kind of a thing. Is that you? Yeah, it's me. Totally anthropomorphizing there, but I think you kind of get the idea. So here's an example of their signature whistles. You can see that each one of them is different for each individual, and they learn these. Mothers and calves have similar whistles. There are variations on a theme, if you will, and they learn these. The calves learn these whistles from their mothers. Another cognitive tool that dolphins have is cooperation and coordination. And I wish I could show you this video because it's actually really impressive of these two dolphins that are told to do something new, to create a new behavior, do something you haven't done yet, which is cool in and of itself. It means that they have conceptual understanding, right? And then they're told, like, do it together. And so you see these two dolphins get this signal. They go underwater, they both emit their signature whistle, and there's this pause, and then all of a sudden at the same time, they synchronize their behaviors and they both float on their back and flip their flukes. How do they do that? How are they able to coordinate these behaviors? We see chimpanzees do similar. In this picture, you've got two chimpanzees that are in separate rooms, and they can independently leader, and there's this unspoken exchange of, yeah, let's do this. And they are drinking bananas. So they figure out how to coordinate their behavior and work together. And then teaching is the most sophisticated form of social learning, okay? And it's also the most efficient. And we have some evidence of teaching among wild chimpanzees. And recently we've got some pretty good evidence of teaching in Atlantic spotted dolphins. And I don't know if this is going to play. Probably not. What we find in spotted dolphins is that these aren't the sponge users. These are just mothers foraging in the sand. They're in the Bahamas. And they chase prey significantly longer. They make significantly more body gestures oriented toward the prey in the sand in the presence of their calves than in the presence of other dolphins. So it suggests that they're modeling this behavior for their calves to help them learn to forage. So they're teaching their calves something. Okay, and then finally, we have some pretty extensive working memory capacities in dolphins. Research suggests that they have a greater working memory capacity than do chimpanzees. And that's both in the auditory and visual domains. So they're able to remember sounds and identify sounds after 2 minutes. They're able to remember up to 4 different sounds at a time and recognize whether a new sound was heard as part of those sounds. So it's on par with what our working memory is. Our working memory capacity is at about 4 to 5, and dolphins seems to be at about 4 as well. Chimpanzees, 2 to 3 items. And not only do they have a high working memory capacity in the auditory and visual modalities, but also their echolocation. They can remember whether they've echolocated on an object across 2 minutes. And one of my favorite abilities that's really unique to dolphins is that they can integrate their senses. So you can blindfold a dolphin by putting eye cups over its eyes, set it down and tell it to echolocate on an object, like a strange, new 3-dimensional object in their tank. They'll echolocate on it, and then you have them come back up to the surface, wait 2 minutes, get their attention again, take the blindfolds off, show them that object with 2 others above the surface. So they can't echolocate on it up above the surface. They have to only use visual processing. And they can identify the object that they only echolocated on up the surface. So we've got some sensory integration here where they're able to visually represent information that they've only echolocated on. Pretty cool. We see that dolphins are capable of symbolic representation. All of these things are kind of intertwined. They are capable of self-awareness. Given the mirror recognition task, they recognize themselves in the mirrors. This is something humans don't even do until we're about 18 to 24 months old. Elephants are capable of this, and chimpanzees. Those are the only known species on Earth that are capable of seeing themselves in the mirror and knowing it's themselves. So we see this toolbox of cognition and behavior that we have in common with dolphins. And it started me thinking, well, why? I mean, they live in the water, we live in the land, we're in opposite environments. Why would we need to be thinking about things in the same way and doing the same things? So it started thinking, what else do we have in common? And that's when I started looking at, okay, well, let's see what their brain's up to. Maybe they have a brain like ours. Wouldn't that be wild? So how do we measure big brains? Well, I want to introduce you to the concept called the encephalization quotient. And this is a way of measuring brain mass controlling for body size. And this is important because, I mean, a blue whale is a huge animal, right? It's going to have a big brain. But when you think about how big it is, the brain isn't actually that impressive. So here's that comparison of a monkey brain, dog brain, orangutan, human, and dolphin. You can see that the human and dolphin brains are about the same size. But what we really want to measure is that encephalization quotient. So what's the size of the brain given the size of the body? And we do this by measuring the body mass, brain mass of all mammals on Earth. And we average it so that we can come up with this regression line that shows, given all mammals, if you are of body mass X,
you should have a brain mass of Z. Okay? So if your body mass of 10 kilograms, you're expected to have a brain mass of about 50 grams here. So then you can plot where individual species lie in relation to this line. And so you can see that possum is not too far from the line, a little bit below it, indicating that a possum has a slightly smaller brain than expected for an animal of its size. Chimpanzees are a little bit above the line, humans are further above the line, and porpoises, dolphins are right next to them. So on and so forth. So, you measure the distance between that animal's point and the line, and that gives you the inceptization quotient. So, the smaller the number, the closer they are to the line, more average, normal their brain size is. If you're at a negative number, not so good. But a high positive number means that you have a much larger brain than expected for an animal, for a mammal of your size. So here are the inceptization quotients for the animals in question. The bottlenose dolphin is not actually on here, but I can tell you that it would be on par with the dolphin. So you see that modern human is way out here with an inceptization quotient of about 7. Oh, we've got such big brains. Oh, we're so smart. And then you would think, okay, well, chimpanzees, bonobos, those animals that we share 98% of our genes with should probably be the next ones in line there. But they're not. They're all dolphins. We've got white-sided dolphins, common dolphins, rough-toothed dolphins, tabaxi dolphins, orcas are there as well, and bottlenose dolphins, of course. And then we scale it back a little bit and we find our chimpanzee friends, gorillas, and orangutans. So what's up with that? Well, variations in mammalian encephalizational quotient are associated with a few things, like diet, how much protein is in your diet, because in order to build a big brain, you need a fair amount of protein. Social behavior, the more social a species is, the larger their brain tends to be. Physical ecology, and particularly how variable the physical ecology is, has a lot to do with brain size. And then sensory specialization. So, of course, things like echolocation. If you're going to evolve a whole new sense, you're going to have to make some architectural space for that. You're going to have some hardware to run that software. So, it wouldn't be expected that we see bigger brains in dolphins given that they echolocate. But is that all that their brain is for? That's the question. Now, the next thing I want to just mention to you is what is meant by convergence. And the title of my talk is Convergence on Intelligence in Primates and Cetaceans. Well, when we're looking at adaptations in species, we can talk about two different kinds of adaptations. There are homologous adaptations, which means they're present in the common ancestor of that species. And that both species have then just kept that adaptation as they've evolved and diverged into their own lineage. So for instance, the thumb bone that's in a whale's pectoral flipper and the thumb bone that's in our hand are homologous adaptations. They came from our shared common ancestor 100 million years ago. Okay? They didn't evolve separately. Analogous adaptations, on the other hand, are those that weren't present in the common ancestor, but have evolved independently in each species since they diverged. So that's what I mean by convergent evolution. Two separate lines of species have converged on the same adaptation. They've evolved it independently. So for instance, the wing of a bird, bat, pterodactyl, flying squirrel, are all examples of analogous adaptations. While they serve the same function in each of these species, their common ancestor didn't have a wing. Okay? They each evolved that separately. They're analogs of one another. So, okay. I started thinking, well, how have we arrived at these big brains? Did dolphins follow the same path to their big braininess as humans did? Because after all, we haven't shared a common ancestor with them in about 65 to 100 million years ago, which is a very long time. And that common ancestor looked like this guy. Kind of like a possum, not a very big brain. And from here, we diverged into the line that led to modern day dolphins and whales and primates. So let's start with mysticetes. Mysticetes are your baby whales. Your gray whale, your blue whale, right whale, bowhead whale, minke whale, fin whale, that's all of them. And just to go through this quickly here, you can see that cetaceans entered the water in the early Eocene era when they diverged from the line that eventually led to like a hippopotamus. Okay, so cetaceans entered the water. In the middle to late Eocene era, they diverged, separated into the line that eventually became baleen whales and the line that became toothed whales. And then several million years later, in the middle Miocene, we have the divergence of the line that finally led to our modern-day gray whales and then your other baleen whales. Now, along that evolution, there was a lot that changed with mysticetes. They started off as very small mammals with a pretty broad-based rostrum and teeth. They didn't have baleen. They had teeth. Then they had a small body size. Then they evolved this bulk filter feeding strategy, and they had teeth and baleen. And then over time, their body size increased as they got more proficient with this bulk filter feeding, and they could fill up on a lot of this really nutrient-rich and abundant food. They bulked up. Became this big marine mammal, and eventually they lost their teeth and they just filter fed through baleen, which is what we have in our extant species. So let's talk a little bit about this change in body size. When we move from crown cetacea, so that mammal that entered the water, and we move to the line that separated then into odontocetes and mysticetes, we see about a 16-fold increase in body size, with only a doubling in brain mass. So if that cephalization quotient is the ratio of brain mass to body mass, what's that number doing? There goes your EQ, okay? So brain size didn't change much, and then when they separated into your, the line that led to your modern-day bowhead right whales, yielded a 32-fold increase in body size, and again, only about a 2.2-fold increase in brain size. And then we see a 6-fold increase in body mass, a 2.7-fold increase in brain mass for the line that led to modern-day gray whales and blue whales. So we're seeing a lot of increase in body mass, not a lot of brain growth. So what does this mean? This means that these animals specialized in solitary bulk filter feeders. This was a specialization. This was the ability to find a niche and survive in this aquatic environment. Body size increases, and you can increase your body size if you're an aquatic animal because you have aquatic weightlessness, right? You don't have the constraints that gravity produces on body mass. So there's nothing holding you back from becoming huge. And you have every reason to become huge because if you're a big blue whale, predators aren't going to mess with you, right? You're the biggest thing in the sea. You're the biggest thing in the world. Being large also helps with thermoregulation, and if you are feeding on an abundant, you're just swimming through the ocean with your mouth open, scooping up krill, it's pretty easy to support and grow this large size. So the result is there were allometric shifts in the brain and body mass relationship. Okay, bodies increased, brains didn't need to. Why get a bigger brain if we really don't have any big problems to solve? So, mysticetes evolved to be solitary foragers that were specialized for brawn, not brains so much. So then we can look at the odontocete line and we have a different story. In the odontocete line, when they split from baleen whales, we see a 22% decrease in body mass and no change in brain size. So body gets smaller, brain stays big. And this pattern continues throughout the rapid diversification of odontocetes. So odontocetes split off into many, many species very, very quickly. And so throughout that diversification, we see body size getting smaller, brain size staying the same, except for orcas and sperm whales. If you know anything about orcas and sperm whales, you know that they're some of the smartest fishes in the sea. They're not fishes. But they're very clever animals. Orcas and sperm whales are the exception to this general decrease in body size trend. For orcas, the line that started orcas experienced a 20-fold increase in body size, and for sperm whales it was a 107-fold increase. So they were doing something kind of like mysticetes were doing. They were getting really big, bulking up. But their brain size also increased. So instead of that like doubling of brain size, we've got a 5.3-fold increase for orcas and only a 6.5-fold increase for sperm whales. So the brain's also bulked up. But the highest rates of body and brain mass growth actually occur within the Delphinidae family. So these are your oceanic dolphins. So remember, up until this point, body size is shrinking, and then all of a sudden, when you get to Terciops truncatus, which are your bottlenose dolphins, and common dolphins, Delphinus delphus, Delphinus capensis, you see an increase again in body size and an increase in brain size. So something kind of strange happening here. So what does this mean? What I'm showing you here is the change over millions of years in body mass, brain mass, and encephalization quotient. So the change in brain mass is what you see in blue. The change in body mass is what's in blue. The change in brain mass is in red, and then the change in EQ, which is this balance of the two, is in green. You can see that for your baleen whales, you have a pretty steady increase in body mass, not so much increase in brain mass. So that leads to an initial increase and then a decline in encephalization quotient. For your sperm whale, kidney sperm whale, you see an increase in body mass accompanied by a moderate but still increase in brain mass. And so you have a steady, early increase in EQ and then it kind of levels off. Right? Your river dolphins, body mass is going up and down over evolution. Brain mass is kind of accompanying that. But brain mass actually increased a little bit at a faster rate and a little bit more than body mass, and so you get this pretty steady increase in encephalization quotient. And river dolphins are one of those animals that we think of as being pretty clever. They've learned to live in fresh water. And then if you look at Terciops truncatus, which is our bottlenose dolphin, you see that body mass went up and down and up and down, and then in the last about 2 million years or so, there was this big spike in body mass. Bigger. Same thing happened to brain mass. Pretty steady increase and then a spike in the last 2 million years. And so when you look at their encephalization quotient, you see the same thing. Pretty steady climb, a little bit of drop, and then a spike again in the last 2 million years. So, what does this mean? It means that all of these animals took some very different trajectories to the brain size that they have. The general trend in cetaceans is that mysticetes increased body size, odontocetes decreased body size, and that both of them had not much change in brain mass. So you do get changes in encephalization quotient as a result of that. Orcas, sperm whales, common dolphins, bottlenose dolphins seem to be exceptions to this rule. They had increases in brain size that matched the increases in body mass. So what this means is that the brain-body alonity, the relationship between brain growth and body growth, changed at least once in the odontocete line. They started off getting smaller in their body, and then something made that reverse. They started getting bigger again and having bigger brains. So why is that? Well, we'll kind of come back to that. Let's talk about what happens in primates. Primates are a little bit cleaner, evolutionary speaking. Nice linear trends, pretty much an overall trend to increase brain size, decrease body size. Okay? So what we're seeing here is the branch of the tree of life that's led to modern-day Homo sapiens and the great apes. And humans diverged from the other great apes about 5 to 6 million years ago. So what you see here is a divergence in the line that led to modern-day humans and then chimpanzees and gorillas and orangutans on the left. And during that time, some important things happened. Shortly after we diverged from chimpanzees, we evolved adaptations for walking bipedally, walking up on 2 legs. And this led to the narrowing of our hips, okay, which also leads to the narrowing of the birth canal, which makes it tricky if you need to have a baby with a big brain. So, I want you to just keep that in mind, because this is something else that happened in cetaceans. As cetaceans moved into the water, they no longer walked on 4s, their legs kicked back out and they formed a peduncle. The hip region narrowed so that they could have flippers and be more hydrodynamic. So this snare of the birth canal, making it difficult if you need to have a baby with a big brain. But if big brains are important, you've got to find a way to overcome that, right? So this is a puzzle for nature. How's she going to solve it? Well, we'll come back to that. So we continue to evolve big brains. Those small hips walking bipedally, that's not going to hold us back. By the time you get to the line that led to Homo habilis and Homo erectus, we had a brain that was 600 cc's, and we were capable of processing food, including meat, so we had tool use. So this allowed us to consume a higher level of protein that could then fuel the evolution of this big brain. After we split off from Homo erectus and on our way to the line that led to Homo neanderthalis, Hypergensis and modern Homo sapiens, brain size increased again to about 1200 cc's, so we have a doubling of brain size. And then finally, when we diverged from the Homo heidelbergensis, the things that are different between us and them is our large brain of 1400 cc's. We also have, demonstrate the capacity for art, symbolic thought, and full-blown language. Okay? Now, the reason that psychologists are so interested in chimpanzees as a comparative species is because they're considered a conservative species. They haven't changed a lot since the ancestor that we last shared with them some 6 million years ago. And I wanted to show you this is just evidence of that. When we look at estimated brain volume across millions of years, Australopithecus, which is like the Australopithecine afarensis, the famous Lucy fossil, had a brain size of about 500 milliliters. And you can see that it increases as we move into the hominid lineage and up to Homo sapiens. But chimpanzees, modern day chimpanzees, have a brain volume about the size of Australopithecus. So they've conserved that small brain size. So they give us a clue as to what our ancestors might have not only looked like, but acted like and thought and been capable of. So this is just another way of showing this rapid brain expansion in the hominid line. You see some pretty steady growth in the brain, cranial capacity, and then it just takes off once you get into the hominid line. There's rapid expansion of brain growth. So why is that? Why do we need such a big brain? Well, we don't. Another way to look at changes in the brain and the evolution of the brain is to look at the evolution of various structures in the brain. And the prefrontal cortex, which is this area in the very front of your brain, is important for things like inhibition, foresight, planning, working memory, attention, problem solving, all of those higher order executive functions, decision making and stuff. And it's a slowly developing area of the brain. In fact, it doesn't fully develop until about age 25, the prefrontal cortex. So you're not operating in a fully adult brain until you're not 18, but 25. So I always tell my students, don't make any big decisions before you're 25. You don't have your full prefrontal cortex yet. That's important for decision making. And so what you see is that the change in the prefrontal cortex that rapidly expanded and is proportionally larger in modern day humans than bonobos, chimpanzees, and other great apes. So, then the next question might be, well, what does the prefrontal cortex of dolphins look like? Yeah, the answer to that is kind of disappointing. The prefrontal cortex, rather than growing outward and elongated, it's not very impressive. Well, shoot. We thought we were going to be so similar. But just because we house those capacities, problem solving, inhibition, decision making in our prefrontal cortex, doesn't mean that they evolved to house them in the same place. Okay, so it's not totally a dead end. They could have evolved brain structures differently, and their architecture could have evolved differently. We do see some important similarities. One is in the insular cortex. This is the area of the brain that kind of folds in. If you think of your brain like a boxing glove, this is the area kind of where the thumb pocket would be. It folds in, and it's actually an area of the cortex where the temporal lobe, which is responsible for hearing and processing auditory information and language, connects with the frontal lobe and the parietal. So there's all this interconnection, all this neural interconnection. folds are deeper, and there are more of them, suggesting that they have more surface area and greater connection between neurons. So how do we put this all together? Well, the cortical evolution of cetaceans proceeded along very different lines than in primates and other large mammals. And it led to the evolution of a very different looking brain, right? Despite this divergence, many cetaceans emit some of the most sophisticated cognitive abilities among all mammals, and exhibit striking cognitive convergences with primates, including humans. In many ways, it is because of the evolution of similar levels of cognitive complexity via a very alternative storyline, a very alternative neuroanatomical path. The comparative studies of cetacean brains and primate brains are so interesting. They have different hardware, but yet they can run the same software. So these are examples of convergent evolution, and it's convergent evolution of function that is largely, in response, it appears to similar societal demands. Now you might say, wait, societal demands? What kind of dolphin society can we be talking about here? She's talking about human? No, talking about dolphin society. So this is just to show you you can see for primates, what's here in red, the evolution of brain and body size. We have body mass, brain mass, and then encephalization quotient. It's very linear across time. Okay, there's just nice steady increases in body, brain, and EQ. For cetaceans, it's a different story. We're up and down, and we're all over the place. Okay? Makes it a little more complicated to study. How are we doing on time? So, going back to this social brain idea, what does this mean? We evolved and converged in these abilities because of societal pressures. Well, Robin Dunbar put forth the idea that human intelligence did not evolve primarily as a means to solve ecological problems like finding food and finding mates, but rather intelligence evolved because of selection pressures related to surviving and reproducing in large and complex social groups. The need to cooperate and live in groups and work together to survive led to the evolution of the brain that we have. So his argument was that when the size of a social group increases, the number of different relationships in the group increases by orders of magnitude, right? The number of people that you have to keep up with and the relationships between them becomes a lot to keep up with. Okay? I mean, any of us who have Facebook know how much there is to keep up with on a regular basis. So, group size is something we can measure. Group size in chimpanzees, their core group size is about 50 individuals. Core group size in humans, even on Facebook, is about 150 individuals. There are about 150 individuals that you deal with on a regular basis. Okay? So, according to the social brain hypothesis, when hominids started living in large groups, selection favored greater intelligence. And as a result of this, you have social and asocial learning processes that evolve concurrently. So there's this feedback loop that sort of happens. So here's a brain that's evolved to keep track of your entire social network. And so what happens is that as you work together, you realize that you can exploit the environment in new ways. This leads to the development of innovation and new technology. This gives feedback into your ability to share this knowledge and pass it along, leads to a faster and more rapid evolution, more rapid innovation of new technology, and newer abilities to exploit the environment. So there's this constant feedback loop that occurs. If you need a bigger brain to keep up and compute all these social relationships, you can also use those computational mechanisms to think about other things in your environment, like how to get food. And so as evidence in support of this idea that the brain evolved primarily because of social selection pressures, Dunbar cites a relationship between neocortex size, the size of the outer brain, and group size in various mammals and vines that across many a million species. The larger your core group, the larger your EQ. So the social brain then produces a social mind. The need to live in large groups creates a pressure for a large brain that can keep track of individuals and relationships. It also creates pressure to be able to navigate this socially complex environment. So not only do you have to keep up with who's who and everybody's name or signature whistle or what have you, but you also have to figure out how to deal with scratch your back, you scratch mine. You buy dinner tonight, I'll buy dinner next time, right? Deception. Yeah, sure, you buy dinner tonight, I'll buy dinner next time. There'll be no next time, right? And then coalition formation. Hey, I went to dinner with so-and-so. They never paid me back. Let's never go to dinner with them again. Only you and I will go to dinner, okay? This kind of understanding. So these group dynamics relate to theory of mind. This is the developmental psychology, cognitive psychology term we use for the ability to understand the thoughts and emotions of others. Now, as a result of this, you get this arms race to intellect. So you need to cooperate. In order to get food, in order to hunt, in order to get fish to school together so that you can eat, you have to work together. Okay? You're going to survive in this environment, and in the niche you've been placed, you've got to cooperate. So you got to cooperate, right? As a result of that, somewhere along the line, there's going to be an individual or two that realizes they can defect or deceive from that cooperation and gain more. Okay? It's bound to happen. Always does. But as a result of that, there's going to be pressure to develop or evolve some kind of mechanism that helps you avoid being deceived. Nobody wants to be cheated. So we detect cheaters, we avoid them, we spread gossip about them, we form alliances. Now you've got alliance formation. Now you've got the maintenance of a long-term relationship that, hey, you and me, we'll stick together, we'll stay away from so-and-so. Anybody who's watched Survivor knows about alliance formation. Now, when you form alliances, then this creates the pressure to coordinate your activities. Well, how are we going to stay away from them? Well, we'll stay over here, and we'll forage together, and we'll work together, and when they come around, we'll leave. Okay? Something along those lines. And then finally, this can create some pressure to communicate. So how do you go about coordinating these activities? What do you use to transmit this information to one another? Gestures are probably one of the primitive forms of this communication. So we come to these converging ingredients as to what makes for a big brain. And I think that dolphins, because they have also evolved large brains, give us an example of the independent evolution of big, complex brains to compare to the evolution of the human being. And by doing this, you can find what's necessary for a big brain. So if it is about your social environment and social complexity, then we should see that this is something that we also have in common with dolphins. So one of the things that we see in common are the big brains and also the genes that go into building the big brains. For example, both humans and dolphins have mutations in the microcephalin gene, which seems to indicate that this gene may play an important role in determining brain size. Other mutations on different genes that lead to the boosting of metabolism also are also present in both dolphins and primates and indicate that it's not really the gene as much as the mutation, it's the outcome that's important, not so much the specific gene involved. So let's talk a little bit about this social complexity. How socially complex are they? And how do we measure social complexity, right? I mean, we're scientists. We need to measure these things. How do we quantify it? Well, one of the things we can look for is the presence of status hierarchies. Are there alpha males that maintain their dominance? Are they challenged? This is a problem for these animals to deal with. And the answer in primates or in the great apes and in dolphins is yes. We can look at group size. How many individuals live in their core group? We mentioned that for chimpanzees it's about 50, for dolphins it's about 30. So we can measure the different group sizes for different species of dolphins. Long-term affiliations, maintenance of long-term relationships is present in dolphins, as it is in primates. And then we can do, more recently, we've developed methods of social network analyses to look at the variability, how frequently do these relationships change, how complex are they, this kind of idea of 6 degrees of separation from Kevin Bacon, how much separation is there between these different dolphins and their relationships. And it turns out it's pretty complex and it's pretty variable. There's a lot changing. There are fission-fusion societies, so members come and go from groups, and you got to keep up with that. If you think back to high school, where boyfriend and girlfriend relationships change all the time, you have to keep up with like who's dating who now, and oh, I can't talk to so-and-so, but oh yeah, they're friends. It's complicated. We see this in dolphins too. They form not only long-term male know that it's present in humans. It doesn't take you much of a stroll down the grocery aisle to see all the social complexity that we have to deal with. And that we seem to like to deal with. That's what's kind of interesting. So this is sort of old news. People have talked about the social brain and social complexity leading to a big brain for a while. But there's something else that we have in common with dolphins, something that I noticed looking into this a little bit further. And one of what this is the extended juvenile period. So the juvenile period is the time between weaning and reaching sexual maturity. From a biological standpoint, this is a really risky thing. Okay? The purpose of an organism is to pass genes on to the next generation. And so if you are waiting 10 years before you do that, before you're able to successfully reproduce, that's risky. There's a lot that can happen in those 10 years, right? I mean, you could not make it. And especially if you're pretty dependent on adults or parents during that time. Puts a lot of onus on parents to take good care of you and raise you to pass on your genes. So I thought, gosh, I mean, again, Mother Nature, she doesn't deal in excess. She's not frivolous. So why do these organisms, why do dolphins and humans take so long to grow up? There must be some function in this juvenile period. And so while the period between weaning and sexual maturity can be extremely vulnerable, it is a very formative time for young animals. It is during this relatively inexperienced life stage that animals must learn the skills and solidify the relationships necessary to survive to adulthood and become successful reproductive members of their population. So it's a period of learning. Now, I mentioned to you that there's this issue of bipedalism, narrowing our hips, making it difficult to give birth to a baby that has a large brain. So, if this is your problem, then babies get selected who are born with a relatively premature brain. Okay, so now, and you can see that across the great apes and coming from the old and new world monkeys, brain size increases drastically. Okay, so these guys, not like we are. We have big brains. This is a problem for us. So as a result, we evolved babies that are born prematurely, relatively speaking. Okay, we've got a smaller brain than they would have. Let me say it this way: chimpanzee brains are 50% of their adult size when they're born. Human brains are about 20%. So we've got a lot of growing to do after we're born. So more growth than is required after birth in order to achieve a large brain. What this means is that the extended juvenile period likely co-evolved with the growth of humans' larger brains. If you're born with a smaller brain and you still need a big brain when you're an adult, you're going to have to take longer to grow up. And so, let me jump over here real quick. Barry Bogan proposed the idea that in humans, in the hominid lineage, we actually invented childhood as part of this period as part of the juvenile period. And so childhood seems like this fuzzy term, but there's actually a pretty good way to identify it. And we can even do this using fossil records. Back molars, the appearance of the back molars is the marker of childhood because molars, your rear molars, allow you to eat food and you become less dependent on adults when you can do that. You don't need adults to prepare food or tear it up into small pieces for you. You can eat it on your own. Prior to that, so in other primates we see the eruption of molars early, but in humans we don't see the eruption of molars until about age 7. Okay? So during this time, in between weaning, which is about 2 to 3 in like hunter-gatherer human societies, to the eruption of molars, this is the childhood period. This is when children are still reliant on adults for food preparation, but not to the same extent as they were when they were breastfeeding. They can be fed by siblings and other adults. They're not primarily reliant on mother, but they're still reliant on some adult food preparation. And we see that this period of childhood is extended throughout the hominid lineage. So childhood is here, it's gotten longer and taken up a greater proportion of the lifespan as we've evolved along the hominid lineage. Now, the juvenile period The juvenile period is characterized by the time between weaning or childhood and sexual maturation or full social independence. So it's characterized by play, by delayed development, of sexual maturity in humans. And then finally, in humans in particular, you have this period of adolescence, which is another period that seems purely unique to modern humans. Adolescence is where you see a marked transition from juvenility to adulthood in humans. You don't see it in other animals. It's characterized by that growth spurt you see teenagers go through during those awkward teenage years. A prolonged period of physical maturation, exploration of adult and sexual roles, refinement of social strategies, where you're really figuring things out. Now, let's see if I can... so I mentioned that chimpanzees are born with about 50% of their adult brain size. In dolphins, it's about 40% of their brain mass, and they don't reach full brain development until they're about 10 years old, so they take 10 years for their brain to fully develop to its adult size. Humans are born with 25% of their brain mass, and they reach full brain development in about 18 years, more or less. And so, let's see, let me make sure I'm staying on track here. So what I have plotted here is the proportion of the percentage of the lifespan that dolphins spend in each of these stages, in gestation, in infancy, in that juvenile period between weaning and sexual maturity, and then in adulthood. And I compare that to humans. And what do you see here? Dolphins spend a greater proportion of their lifespan growing up than do humans. They take longer to learn and reach sexual maturity than we do. So again, it's the question, why? What is this juvenile period for? It's so risky. Well, one of the things that they do, like humans, is they stay with their mom. So even after weaning, they hang out with mom. Mom seems to help chomp up fish and help them perfect their foraging skills. They also affiliate with mom's friends and the rest of mom's group and other moms and other calves their age, so they're forming these social bonds. They go through a period where then they move away from mom a little bit and move into these juvenile bands, or what seems like a period of adolescence, where they're in same-sex groups and they're practicing social behaviors, they're practicing sexual behaviors. They're not fully capable of reproducing yet, but they sure are practicing. And then finally, when they move into adulthood, they shift from associating in these mixed-sex groups of young animals towards these sexually segregated male alliances and then female networks, where females will associate based on reproductive status. Pregnant females hang out together, females with newborns hang out together, so on and so forth. So, in primates, Tracy Joffe found that there was a very strong relationship between, she looked across 27 species of the modern day primates and found that there was a very strong correlation between brain size, group size, and the length of the extended juvenile period. So that suggests the extended juvenile period co-evolved with a big brain and large social groups, and that these factors likely co-evolved, enabling a runaway selection for intellectual abilities capable of solving problems across multiple domains, not just the social domain. So, what about in dolphins? I wanted to look at these data in dolphins. I wanted to do the same kind of study in dolphins. But there are about 73 extant, or modern-day living odontocene species, including about 40 dolphins. We have encephalization quotient measures and group size data for only about 25 of these individuals. And of those individuals, we have data that could calculate the juvenile period on only about 15 species. That does not a study make. So, and in fact, one of the most important pieces of missing data is on this guy, the Lagarorhynchus albirostris, or the white-beaked dolphin, which has an encephalization quotient of about 6.7. Humans are 7.1. Pretty smart dolphin, but we don't know anything about its life history. We don't know how long it takes to reach sexual maturity. We don't know how long it lives. So we need more data. Fossil data. We need fossil data of cranial capacity, particularly within the Terciops line, particularly within the Delphinus line. We need life history data on sexual maturation. We're still discovering species of dolphins because they wash up dead on the shore somewhere. We go, oh, we haven't seen this guy before. And we know it exists, and we can measure its cranial capacity and its brain size, but that's all we know. We don't know what its group structure is like, or what its life history is like when it reaches sexual maturity. So we need more behavioral data on social complexity and cognition, especially for species like this. We need population data on core group size, and we need some phylogenetic resolution. The evolution of dolphins and branches and relationships are still uncertain relative to primate lineage. But here's what we do know. Here's what the kind of thought I want to leave you with. What's the function of this juvenile period? Why is it important? That's a question I keep coming back to. To kind of answer this question and answer my dad's question about what the heck can we learn from dolphins? I think the juvenile period is a time for play. And play is important. What's the biological function of play? Talk about that too. I think play is why youth is not wasted on the young. Because play is exploration. It generates diversity of behavior and cognition. It is the evolutionary roots of tool use, of culture, of innovation. Play is an adaptive wild card. It's a time for trial and error, where there's a moratorium granted on the consequences of your errors. Even in human societies, we see this. Juveniles are treated a little bit more leniently in court, which is ironic since we're here. And so when I talked early on about problem solving and this creative behavior and object play and how it generates all this slew of other cognitive capacities, that's because play is all of these things. It is this opportunity to generate new adaptations. So I want to leave you with final thoughts. The extended juvenile period, which I think we should actually just call the extended play period, is not just important for the development of a psychologically and physically mature individual. Its function extends much further than that. It has been crucial to the evolution of intelligent, cognitively and behavioral flexible species, and we see that in humans and we see that in dolphins. And so I think